Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Founder Built podcast with your two hosts, Jaden and I. Today we have a wild episode for you all, as always. ChatGPT just released a new Canvas feature to where it's essentially a new interface that you can interact with, edit your captions, or edit the outputs. Jaden, have you played around with it at all? And give me some of the insights that you have.
Yeah, no, this thing's crazy. I saw I like to mark the tweets out of OpenAI, so like as soon as they happen, they pop up on my phone. I think if you get them from the official OpenAI account, you're gonna get like the latest AI news that's pro hack for everyone. Yeah, so this Canvas thing dropped. I was bummed because it was like an hour or maybe like 2 hours after it dropped. I still didn't have this feature on my account yesterday. But after about 4 hours, I think they rolled it out to everyone. So they were pretty quick. If you have a paid membership, either with Teams or just the paid account, you're going to get this. I think they're going to roll it out to everyone eventually. Anyways, there's kind of a roll up. But in any case, this thing's amazing. So essentially what it does is when you're talking with it, it tries to identify for two situations. Number one is if you're writing code, and number two, if it can tell you're trying to work on a document. And essentially what happens if you're, let's say you're writing a document and you're like, hey, help me write like a school paper about X, Y, and Z thing, it will trigger this whole side panel, which is pretty much like a Google Doc that pops open. And it's just way more, instead of like you getting an output, you copy and paste it into Google Docs, you're manipulating it there, you're able to manipulate and like work on the whole thing right inside of ChatGPT. Now, they have a couple really cool features. One of them is the fact that everyone probably knows the pain of like, you get it to write like a document or like a paragraph of copy that you need. And maybe like one paragraph's good, but like the next two are like bad. And then you just try to change your prompt over and over again. And it's redoing the whole thing every single time. A couple things happening. Number one, uses up a ton of compute and tokens when you might have liked part of it. But number two, it's just like, sometimes I'm like, okay, what did it like tell me like last time? And I like go look at an older version. I'm like, okay, I'm taking this paragraph from the older version, but I like this paragraph from the newer version. It's just like this whole debacle. It's kind of annoying. Now what they're doing is when it opens up in this document view, you can highlight a sentence or paragraph or a title that you want to edit. And there's a little pop-up that comes up and you type a little prompt in there and it's like, okay, just change this paragraph, but talk more about X, Y, and Z topic. And, don't talk about this thing and change the tone to be a little bit more like this. Rewrites the paragraph. To me, I love that. I mean, there's a ton of features, but right based off of that, what's your take? Is this something you think you would use? Is this useful?
I have a little bit of a pessimistic attitude with this just because I've kind of completely shifted anything code related. And honestly, for the past about 6 months, I've been using Claude more than ChatGPT. For me, the only use case that I have with ChatGPT right now, 4.0 is a little bit different because it is a better model. But right now, currently, the only thing that I'm using ChatGPT for is actually the in-house GPTs that I've created and configured over time. However, I think it kind of reinvents a new kind of feature of these LLM models to where you can actually go in and select parts of it and then also chat with it as well, which I really enjoy. Claude has a new kind of artifacts feature in which they released a couple months ago. I absolutely fell in love with that one. It's kind of a similar feature in terms of the interface, but I do think that the inline editing that they have is a really great feature. And I'm surprised. It's funny because OpenAI comes out with these features and these updates that like you never thought of. And you're just like, when it comes out, you're like, why didn't I think of that? Like, that's such like a great idea that I feel like I would have had already. And so it's a really cool feature for everyone that hasn't checked it out. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think this whole thing was honestly a response to Claude's artifact. That thing's been so popular and it's pulled a bunch of developers specifically over to Claude. Now, the feedback I get from like all the developers working on my software startups is Claude is so much better. They all use it for Claude, but they say when they run out of tokens on Claude, then they move over to ChatGPT as their backup because sometimes they just are blasting through so much stuff. They love Artifact. Now, the thing that I have heard from a lot of people though is still, even with everything, Claude is better for coding, but they are saying that they like that there's more features and essentially more UI and stuff in the new Canvas for developers. So I talked a little bit about some things that people working on like Word documents would use. As far as developers have a couple interesting new things. There's essentially a shortcut where you can highlight your code or have it do the whole chunk. You can add comments to the code, so it will go through and add comments to the code. Of course, this is something that any LLM can do, but it's kind of nice to have the shortcut. It can go and do bug fixes on the code. So with their new O1 model, that's kind of like advanced reasoning or whatever, it goes through essentially every line of the code, checks it for bugs, which is kind of nice, especially if like you get it to generate something, you make some edits and you want to make sure there's no bugs. It's kind of cool that it can do that. It can also change the language. So there's a button in there where you get it to generate some code in Python, and you're like, hey, I don't need this in Python, I want this in TypeScript. It can change it into TypeScript or a number of other languages. And then the last thing I think that they kind of added as a shortcut button is the ability to do a code review. So review your code and help you work on it that way. So in any case, they're trying to add all these features. I think it's definitely in response to Artifact and what Anthropic's done there. I've heard people say, though, that the UI and the functionality of this is a little bit better than Artifact, but it, like, as far as the code itself that you're getting, like the actual model, people are still saying that Anthropic's better for coding.
100%. And that was one of the points that I was going to mention as well, is that unless they had a new model that came out that beat over the benchmark scores versus Claude, it was still going to be a lesser code. And the funny thing is that I'm here in Georgia right now, and I've been giving some lectures and master classes, and we figured out not only that the code is much, much better in Claude, but also a lot of the, I don't want to say far-fetched second languages, but the languages such as Georgian as well, Claude absolutely knocks them out of the park. So I'm interested in now Claude's response to that, because I feel like it's a lot more difficult to change the model, and especially for OpenAI, there's always this big hype when they come out with a new model, especially since they just released O1 and the thinking model, as you were just referring to. It's a lot easier for Claude to come out with an interface update than it is for OpenAI to come out with a whole new model that's, I think it was 6% worse than Claude. So really, really interesting. However, I also think that it's a really good thing, because people that, like myself, that don't know anything about code, I can now go in there and I can interact with code in the way that I would be talking to a fifth grader or my grandmother or whatever it may be, in a way that I can now kind of understand it a little bit more, or at least maybe not understand it, but interact with it to a higher level, which is really awesome.
Yeah, no, I think you made a great point. It's always exciting when a new update happens, a new feature comes in, and so it's like, oh, this is super cool. But at the same time, if it's not a new model, it doesn't, you can only do so much. Like, there's already startups that do this, and a lot of people are like saying, oh man, they just killed like Cursor and like all these other AI startups when they come up with all these UI things. That being said, I mean, obviously it's cool functionality, it's useful, but until they come up with a new model, it's not that big. And I think the barriers to entry for coming up with a new model are getting harder and harder, because they're, Anthropic and OpenAI, they're all signing these deals where they're like, we're gonna, give regulators our models to go test out before we release them and all this yada yada stuff. So it's just getting harder and harder to put out models. So yeah, I think they resort to like O1 preview that OpenAI came out with wasn't even a new model. It was just essentially a whole bunch of prompts that it runs every single output through to get train line of reasoning or whatever, train of thought stuff done. So yeah, it's interesting because these aren't new models. We would hope that OpenAI has a new gangbuster model coming out, but probably Anthropic's training one as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. It currently still feels like there might be a slight edge on pure model quality out of Claude. OpenAI has done some clever things with prompts, but then again, it's like 30% more computational intensive. So like they're running it through a ringer in order to try to edge out Claude with the O1 preview right now. So we'll see how that shakes out, because Claude could just as easily figure out whatever those prompts are and run the same kind of line of reasoning on Claude and then be better again. So until the new model comes out, we're kind of in this stalemate where people are edging each other out in little areas, but no one is a clear winner here, I would say.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed the episode today, make sure that you leave us a review. We would really, really appreciate it. Over on Spotify, you hit the About tab, drop us some stars, and on Apple, leave us a comment, a review, anything that you found interesting in the episode. We read them. We'd love to get back to you, and we hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.